Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Yoon Choi of Forest Ventures. Yoon, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Hall.
Great. So can you tell us about your background before coming into the early stage investing world? What did you do before now?
Yes, I've been working as a corporate VC for 10 plus years, helping corporations come up with a new business strategies, partnerships, strategic alliances besides venture investment. I also led a few M&A transactions. I've had exposure to investment in semiconductors, hardware, and software, giving me, in a sense, the unique exposure to all the components needed to successfully invest in the current world of automotive or autonomous everything. Most recently, I worked at a corporate fund for a large automotive player for 3 years. The fund invested in autonomous mobility-related startups in Silicon Valley. I started an early-stage fund in June of this year to focus in mobility investment because I saw the need to invest early-stage startups to grow into the market through partnerships. New solutions and technologies come up every day, but it's somewhat disconnected with other players in the equation. I wanted to bring my background to help connect the dots. Since I started a new fund, I've made 6 investments while fundraising.
Very good. That's a good start for your fund there in the area of mobility. So for our investors out there, what's your advice for them who are just now starting to invest in startups? What would you like to advise them on based on your experience?
As basic as it sounds, having a good understanding of the industry that you want to invest is key. You need to have a deep understanding of the ecosystems, stakeholders, underlying technologies, industry objectives, and dynamics in the market. You have to be able to identify what technologies and teams will move the market and how your background and network can make contributions to help startups succeed. I'm a strong believer in vision alignments between the investor and the investee. I'm constantly exploring the issues we are facing when it comes to mobility. So I think that you have to be really proactive in asking questions. What are the issues? Why? Where do you see the issues with the mobility in your daily lives? So asking yourself questions like, where is the pain point? What is the solutions to that? How does a technology idea improve the mobility score? The market is the crossover point between realizing the challenges and moving towards real solutions.
Well, that's a good point. Understanding the industry very well makes much better decisions. So let's talk about the state of investing in mobility. How is the industry evolving? It seems like it's moving very quickly now, but where do you see it going?
Yes, maybe let's take a quick look at the statistics. So 340 plus new EV models will be launched in the next 3 years. 7 times more startups in the space. 93% of investment is actually coming from non-automotive players. So in terms of cars, 2x increase in software complexities, right? So I think that the most recent news that kind of made me laugh was the Russian gun maker came up with the EV to rival with the Tesla. I mean, this Russian gun maker was behind AK-47. Can you believe it? So in terms of like how the industry is evolving, I think that the industry is evolving through partnerships because of the need to bring together multiple stakeholders with a different skill set. City governments and policymakers collaborate with the car OEMs or OEMs, component or data system vendors work with the startups to explore competing technologies. So I think the collaboration has been imperative, and then a lot of stakeholders in the space realize that. I think that that's sort of like a key evolvement in the industry. So everybody's come to realization that no one can win alone. So autonomous vehicles, it's not just about sensors or hardware platforms, perceptions, data collections, data processing, data analytics, or path planning, so connectivity, security, but also policies and regulations have to be in place. And also in terms of user side, right? User interfaces and even psychological adjustment should be carefully examined. That's where we stand.
It's surprising how much investment is coming from outside the automotive industry into mobility. 93% of the investment comes from somewhere else. That's surprising. Exactly where is that coming from? Is that the tech industry, or where do you see the new players coming from?
Yes, I mentioned the Russian gun maker coming into the equation, right? So if you look at all the non-automotive players like Google, Waymo, Apple, Samsung, or all of consumer electronic side where they've been building components or systems, they're all coming into the market. Like, as we mean, name a few that is not deploying their capital into the automotive scenes. There is almost none. I haven't heard.
So it's not like everybody's participating, everyone's getting involved, and so it's going to get very interesting here going forward. So, as an investor, what is your investment thesis for mobility? What are you looking to invest in?
Investment thesis. Yeah, so I think that mobility, just going back to the basic, right? So mobility affects all important parts of our lives, where we can work, where we can send our kids to school, where we can live, our environment and our communities. For example, say want to go to a concert, it's a stadium concert that holds like 50K concert goers. Sometimes the hassle of getting there stops you from venturing out, right? Do you keep on activities due to transportation? How about transportation that reaches people who currently don't travel due to the cost of inconvenience? I look for investment opportunities in mobility solutions that impact all the parts of our daily lives. I think practicality and scalability are definitely two key elements that sort of defines my investment thesis.
Are there some example startups that you've invested in or looked at that you think are a good example of meeting that thesis?
Yes. So a few investments that I made in the past, for instance, there's a company who is developing micromobility solutions, right? It's B2B micromobility solutions. So are you familiar with the micromobility, the rise of micromobility?
Would you consider that to be the scooters and the electric bikes? And maybe that's not the exact same definition, but something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, the last mile transportation. And there are a lot of issues around that micromobility in terms of city regulations and new policies. But this company basically developed the idea of micromobility solutions that is hyper local and then hyper sort of needs based. For instance, they are deploying these micromobilities in a big theme parks or hospitals or in companies or university campuses. So in a way, so you deploy this micromobility in a more controlled environment. So I think they can build the platforms and then adding to hyper local oriented solutions when they go out to like new environments. I think that that's a very clever idea.
So in the early days of the scooters, it just seemed they showed up in cities and handed out without any concern for regulations or having a place to ride or drive them on. They just went on the roads. And then there seemed to be some pushback from the cities that they weren't following regulatory, they weren't getting approval and permits and so forth. How much do you think regulatory is going to gate the advance of those technologies, or do you think regulatory is going to come into line with them very quickly?
I think the city is realizing the issue that we are facing with public transit, right? A lot of times you have empty buses running in the city roads, and then it costs $10 per ride per person, whether it's running empty or not. They're realizing the inefficiency of the current public transit, and they're actually coming forward with the micromobility solutions to connect last mile. And I cannot really give out the partner that is working with a certain city. The city actually asked the OEMs to come up with the micromobility solutions. So I think that they are looking at the same directions as industry.
Well, it seems like you have two choices. You can either use a car to go downtown or you can use a scooter. And they have pros and cons. A car, I can put more things into it, but now I have to have a place to park it. Or maybe I get a ride-sharing app and it takes me and drops me off and then comes back and picks me up later so I don't have to park it. But then there's scooters where I can just go wherever I want when I want, but I can't carry much with me, just maybe a backpack and a laptop, but that's about it. And then I can go. And so it seems like there's some places where scooters will be a good fit, and then some applications where cars will be a good fit. And just trying to figure out where the trade-off is between that and how cities are trying to manage that trade-off.
Okay, I'll try to answer to that question as good as I could. So basically, I think that there's mobility is not just like from moving from point A to point B. It's really like has to be a systems, right? As you mentioned, it's not from just using cars would solve problems, or it's not neither or it's not just one solution. You have to sort of like have to build a system that fulfills the need of users, right?
Right.
So you'll have to connect the dots from public transportation and private transportation. So I think that the integration is the key. So how you can connect the dots is really a huge challenge for all stakeholders. So I'm saying that this is going to be very hard problems to solve for everyone.
That brings me to my next question. As a startup in this space, what are the challenges they face in launching their startup in the mobility space? Of course, there's regulatory we talked about, but what else is there?
So most startups that I interacted with, they're mostly focusing on, okay, this is a trend for the autonomous vehicle, so I'll be focusing on solving sort of perception side or prediction side. But I think that it's really a piece that is going into a big picture. So you need to understand not only what you're developing, but you have to understand the big picture. And most founders that are in the industry, their sort of understanding of a bigger picture where their technologies or solutions will fit into is very limited, right? I mean, there's a solution to it. You need to talk to a lot of different sort of stakeholders, even to the city. And that brings to next question. I think that one of the biggest challenges as entrepreneurs in mobility, the business model, right? So what is the business model? Do you see any autonomous cars driving today on the roads, on the highways? You don't see any of those. So who's buying the solutions that you developed? What is sort of the timeline? Do you have enough funding to last until the market actually happens? Actually, you have a buyer for your solutions.
So as you mentioned before, you're creating a system of interchangeable technologies, and tying them together is the challenge, and understanding that bigger picture is the key element that startups have to think about, how they're fitting into the bigger picture, which seems to be changing a lot these days. So it can be a difficult problem for sure. So on the investor side, if someone's investing in these technologies, what are the risks they face that's unique to mobility that they have to consider? Is it just regulatory? The city may not give me a permit, or are there other challenges?
There are multiple challenges. Other challenges are the following. There's also market adoption, right? And also specific local needs and the economics of the solutions and technologies. So if you are looking at your technology as sort of like mass market adoption, and what are the things that you need to consider to go into mass sort of market? It could be sort of hardware components that are too expensive for you to build, and then for users to actually use your solutions. So there is definitely sort of technological hurdles that you have to carefully examine, and also like, okay, am I going to use your mobility solutions because it's cheaper than me driving on the highways to commute? Right. So these things are very important to consider. Like, are you addressing to mass market adoption, and then are you actually addressing the issues of market adoption?
So where do you see the immediate opportunities to invest? What do you think is the low-hanging fruit that people should be considering today?
So trucking industry is one. So trucking industry has been probably one of the old industries that we have today. And a lot of segments of trucking industry, for instance, are not modernized. They're still using papers. There's no sort of overlooking software that connects each segment. So there's a lot of software, sort of AI, algorithms, analytics. These technology can go into sort of revolutionize the trucking industry. And also you see a lot of autonomous trucks that are coming into the market. There are like startups coming out almost like one new one every month. So because it's a low-hanging fruit, autonomous trucks, they're mostly driving on highways, right? And that is very, very easy for you to deploy trucks that are driving without drivers or like little sort of workforce involved in the process. And then also investment opportunity around the trucking. There's last mile delivery. How can you do last mile delivery? And then how you can sort of manage the delivery systems.
Well, those are good opportunities to pursue. So here in the last few minutes from the end of the interview, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I really want to bring out, like in terms of investment thesis or the space that we invest, I think that out of the box sort of ideas are very, very important in the industry. So I've been thinking, obviously, I'm thinking about solutions to these sort of mobility issues day and night. And one of the things that came to my mind is that so mobility is not necessarily has to look at from the automotive side or industry side. You can also look at it from the other side, who's benefiting the most from mobilities, like businesses, for instance, your restaurant owners or business owners, right? How can you make people actually to come out and use your businesses or spend monies on your businesses, right? So these business users can actually tie mobility to your businesses. So this is an idea, but I think that there are a lot of different angles that we can tackle these issues and come up with efficient and convenient solutions.
That's very interesting. I could see in the future a restaurant wanting to fill the seats might send out ride-sharing cars to pick up people to bring them to the restaurant. And they would just, that would be their advertising budget, would be transporting them to the restaurant for the dinner at different times or at times when they want them there. So it could shift the dynamic a little bit on who actually pays for the transportation. Food for thought for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, yes, even if you think about how we travel internationally, we spend hours looking for cheap tickets. The cost from home to airport or airport to final destination sometimes is as expensive as the flight ticket that you bought, right? And the amount of cars that has to be deployed in the highways for all these people who are going to the airport, like how can you decrease that? Maybe airlines can run a shuttle service as a part of the air tickets.
It's a good point. Well, appreciate your taking time to share your thoughts with us today. How best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
You have my LinkedIn profile. You can connect me through LinkedIn. My name is Yoon Choi.
Great. We'll put the LinkedIn profile on the show notes so people can get back in touch with you. I want to thank you for taking time today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon to see how this industry continues to progress and how the investments go.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Hall T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.